The more I talk to people about deadlifts, either through my personal training or the comments I read below my videos, one thing is really clear to me, and that is a lot of you are terrified. So I've made videos on deadlifts before, but this video is going to be focused on the basic mechanisms that get you in to a successful deadlift. We're going to be talking about mastering your position before the deadlift and how to determine when you're in the correct position before you start lifting up those heavy weights. So like and subscribe, comment down below, helps me get this video out to a lot more people. And if you were baited into this video by my chest, don't comment that below because that's super embarrassing. So first we're gonna start talking about the mechanism of movement without any weights. When I'm teaching people, I like to say, start with your hands on your thighs. After that, you're gonna hinge your hips back and lower your hands to your knees. That is when you get to bend your knees and lower your hands to your shins. This is where a lot of people get tripped up because they believe they should only be using their knees or only using their hips. And that causes their knees to either bend too much, pushing their weight forward, or it causes their legs to be completely straight. And that often puts them on their heels, throwing them off their balance. You should be able to hold this position without rocking back and forth. Your toes should be planted down on the ground without curling them too much, and your heels should be nice and stable without them coming up off the ground. So to finish this exercise, we're gonna move right back up the list. Straighten your legs until your hand meets your knees and hinge those hips forward. So that's a great way to test if your form is correct. However, I wanna talk about hinging your hips and why we do it real quick. A question I get a lot is, how come it's bad if my knees are doing all the work for a deadlift? The way we get to hypertrophy or muscle growth is by having those muscles contract under stress. And the longer the contraction, the harder your muscles have to work. So the farther you move your hips back, the more tension you are applying to that muscle because they're contracting for longer and working harder. And this rule applies to almost every workout. It's the same when you're bench pressing. You want to bring the bar all the way to your chest for that full extension. Same when you're doing pull-ups. You want to extend those arms all the way out so you're getting that full reach. The key words here is time under tension. And if you're just moving your hips a little bit, there might be some tension, but there's not a lot of time. And this is why mobility is so important with hip thrusts and deadlifts, because hip mobility is what activates the glute in the first place. Now, with all that being said, let's move on to the other stuff. Sorry, I had to, that glare was annoying me. It's still bad. Ignore the glare. So the next question I get a lot is, where should your feet be? The short answer is that your feet should be aligned with your hips. For some folks, with the way they stand, that's gonna feel really close together, but get over it, I don't care. Your feet should be under the bar, so your ankles are just about an inch away from the metal. So you're gonna have your ankles aligned with your hips, your toes pointed forward, and your feet underneath the bar, just so that your ankle is about an inch away from the metal. But Kevin, I see people doing wide stances when they're doing heavy deadlifts. Yes. Having a wide stance like that is called a sumo deadlift. They are different, but not better. Let me explain. By widening your legs, you are limiting the mobility of your glutes, and that means other muscle groups like your adductors need to kick in. And your adductors are like muscles inside your legs right here. I've seen online some people say that sumo deadlifts are better for your glutes, and I don't know where people are getting this information because quite literally, if you're hinging your hips less, you're gonna be using your glutes less. However, they can be great for your adductors and other parts of the leg, as well as really helping if you don't have a lot of mobility with your hips. They can still allow you to do a nice deadlift without the full extension. All right, so let's get into the actual fun stuff. Let's talk about the lift. Now, I'm gonna spend a lot of time talking about the first rep that you do because, not to be a hater, but a lot of you look absolutely terrible as you lift the weight up, then you find your footing in proper position, and then you start the workout. But you can do better. I believe in you. Well, maybe. I actually haven't seen what you do. But anyway, there are 3 things to note. 1, avoid the curved back as much as possible. 2, just because you're involving your knees does not mean your weight is forward on your toes. And 3, your arms are just along for the ride. When I have clients that are kind of unsure of how to begin a deadlift, I'll have them do what I call a deadlift fake out. I'll have them get into the proper position and grab the bar as if they're going to do a full deadlift by picking up the weight. And instead, I'll just have them apply as much effort as they can without lifting the weight, but still creating as much tension as possible. So when they do this, you'll hear that clang of the barbell hitting the weights, but they won't come off the ground. This isn't gonna do anything for your muscle, but it's a fantastic way to know if you're engaging your core, to make sure your back is gonna be in the correct position. It's gonna test if your balance is in the right spot. And if you're unsure of yourself, or if you're using a weight that you're not used to, I would advise doing this a few times so that you can make sure that you know that first rep is gonna be just as beautiful as all of the rest. And I know I'm talking a lot about balance and making sure you're not on your toes, but that's because I think it's the biggest hurdle I see people run into. What I've done with clients is explain deadlifts in a different way that mixes squats and Romanian deadlifts together to make the perfect deadlift form. And I'm just gonna talk over this and have editing Kevin explain visually what the hell I mean. First, we're gonna start off with a squat, then we're gonna move to a Romanian deadlift, then you flex at the top to finish the movement, then you move down for another Romanian deadlift and finish the movement by putting the weight down with a squat. So, why am I phrasing it like this? Well, like I was talking about at the beginning of this video, a lot of people either put too much of a squat in their deadlift and that brings them forward, or they use too much hip and they end up yanking the weight up using their arms, throwing themselves back. By imagining the first part of this movement as a squat, you're still going to properly push down into the ground like a standing leg press. However, once that squat is done, the deadlift part comes in and you thrust those hips forward. Then you finish the function in reverse. You push your hips back, and as you can't push your hips back any further, you finish that squat, lowering the weight to the ground. This also helps for tall people who have trouble with their deadlifts because they've got a lot of extra length from the hips down. By focusing the beginning as a squat, I find that a lot of people have a better chance of visualizing the lift while still being able to hold on to their posture and keeping their core tight. The last thing we have to discuss is the thing I've kind of been talking around this whole time, the Romanian deadlift. The Romanian deadlift is virtually the same as a deadlift, except it never touches the ground. And because you're not dropping the weight to the floor, it's gonna have less of a squat motion, which means you're gonna be using a little bit more of your glutes and back and a little bit less of the rest of your legs. Romanian deadlifts follow almost all the same rules as normal deadlifts would, except you're gonna start with a fully straight body. You're gonna push those hips back and slowly bring the weights down, and you're gonna move those hips back until you cannot push them back any further. If you're a visual learner, what I like to aim for is to have my hands in the very middle of my shins and my shins perpendicular to the floor, not leaning forward, not leaning back. Personally, I'd recommend you do these if you're a beginner or if you're scared of any of the motions because they are really easy to do with free weights and they're a simpler movement, so there's less opportunity for things to go wrong. If you're doing this with free weights in your hand, what I like to do is start with the weights neutral at my side so I can have a fully straight position and the weights aren't resting on my body. As you hinge your hips back, I like to move my hands forward so that my palms are facing in front of my shins. And then as I come back up, I rotate my weights back to the neutral position so I can get that full extension once again. And that's all I got, fam. Sorry for being all over the place with this video, but I wanted to go over a lot of different types of basics and I didn't really know how to format that, if you know what I'm saying. But anyway, I hope this video helped either way. And as always, I will be in that comment section down below if you have any questions. So please comment down below if you have any of those. Like, subscribe, do all the things. That helps me out a whole lot. Yeah, so be safe out there and I'll see you next time.